Yesterday, I compared Samsung's new Galaxy S20 Ultra with the iPhone 11 Pro Max, the absolute best devices that both companies offer. However, they're both massive and incredibly expensive, so almost a more important comparison is how good their mainstream flagships are. So welcome to Galaxy S20 versus iPhone 11, and the conclusion here is not one I expected to make. To hold, the new Galaxy S20 feels a lot like any other Samsung flagship. It's mostly glass with a curved back and a slightly narrower body than we're used to, so it's actually relatively compact feeling in the hand. I will say this though, it is in stark contrast with the way the iPhone feels. Apart from height, that phone is bulkier in every dimension. It is thicker, it is wider, and far heavier. We're talking 194 grams, which makes the 163 gram S20 feel featherweight. Both phones are well constructed. The casings are sturdy, with Gorilla Glass on the front and the back, but I'm just not a fan of the way either looks. They don't look like they mean business, as much as their higher-end siblings do. Samsung's S20 is visually a little bland in my eyes, and on first glance looks almost identical to the company's own mid-range phones, like the Galaxy A51 and A71. We're talking $400 devices here. And then as for the iPhone 11, it loses that slick matte finish that I love about the iPhone 11 Pro. And I never quite got used to how it has a square camera module, but cameras that don't actually fill it. Both have IP68 water and dust resistance ratings, and neither has a headphone jack. So on balance, in terms of design and materials, I'm halfway down the middle. Neither is offensive looking, but neither is the prettiest bit of tech I've seen either. By the way, I've just launched a pretty massive giveaway of one Galaxy S20 Ultra and 4 Galaxy S20s. It is free and international, and all rules are in the description. Turning both devices over, the narrative changes. I don't think I've ever seen this much of a one-sided battle between two similarly priced devices. The S20's display is so far ahead of the iPhone 11s that it feels like these two devices are from different decades, which I guess they kind of are. For starters, the Galaxy S20s is larger and brighter. With a consistent brightness level of close to 800 nits, there will be times when this phone is clearly visible, but when the iPhone, at around 625-ish, is actually difficult to read. Plus, the fact that it uses OLED technology compared to LCD just means that it can reach deeper contrast levels. We're talking a smartphone that can natively support HDR10 plus content, versus a phone that can't even support HDR10. And there's so much more here, I almost feel sorry for the iPhone. Resolution, for example, this is a Quad HD Plus panel, whereas this is actually below 1080p. That gives the Samsung over 3 times the number of pixels. Let that sink in. To Apple's credit, that doesn't make Samsung's screen 3 times better, and the iPhone 11 is still reasonably crisp, but there's no shaking the sheer size of that gap. And to add insult to injury, the Galaxy S20 uses the same 120Hz refresh rate that we saw on the Ultra. That is twice the refresh rate of the iPhone, and twice the touch response rate, making it by far the smoother and more responsive smartphone. You almost don't expect it. We're used to seeing the compact smartphones from companies just kind of suck compared to their larger siblings, but that's not the case here. The S20 is just as nippy as its Ultra cousin, so flying between apps on its dynamic AMOLED display is actually quite a surreal experience. The nail in the coffin for the iPhone's display is that its screen is surrounded by some of the thickest borders we've seen this side of 2018, and a forehead that would make Jimmy Neutron proud. Its resulting screen-to-body ratio, at about 79%, makes the S20's 88% look very impressive. One thing Samsung has done is toned down the curvature of all the screens on their S20 phones, so you could argue they've lost a little bit of that display melting into the sides aesthetic that they had going on before. But considering that it wasn't really a functional benefit, I don't think too many people are going to care. It's good to see though, with the iPhone 11, yes, the display is compromised, but the internal performance is not at all. It's got the exact same A13 Bionic chip and 4 gigs of RAM as the top tier iPhone 11 Pro Max. And if anything, the lowest screen resolution here means that games and apps should perform even better on this. The Galaxy S20 is incredibly spec'd too. We're talking 8 or 12 gigs of literally the fastest RAM available on a smartphone, combined with the fastest chips seen on an Android device. That said, the optimization of iOS, combined with the fact that the iPhone has far fewer pixels to push, means that more often than not, I would expect it to get higher gaming frame rates. Now, the camera situation here is much simpler than when we were comparing the $1,000 plus smartphones. There's no 108 megapixel camera, there's no 100 times zoom to talk about, but the important thing to remember is that when it comes to camera hardware improvements, generally speaking, with each successive upgrade, the upgrades become harder to notice, and the end image becomes more about the quality of the software as opposed to the equipment. So, from everything I've seen, the camera on the Galaxy S20 is 90% as good as the one on the S20 Ultras, and the iPhone 11's camera is 95% as good as the one seen on the Pro. But between them, let's take a look. Both phones have a 12 megapixel main camera, but the S20 is fitted with a brand new sensor, almost 1.7 times larger than that of the iPhone, which should mean less noise and more detail, both when there's a lot of light around and also when there isn't. This is actually quite an important point for Samsung. One of the key areas their cameras have fallen behind in has been low light video, but the S20 should be turning this weakness into a relative strength. On top of that, it can do 8K video, which is 4 times the resolution of the iPhone's 4K video. That's not quite as impressive or useful as it sounds. I mean, the 8K video is a little bit janky, and I don't think many people have an 8K monitor to watch it back on, but it's still a seriously impressive feat for a phone of this size. Both have ultra-wide cameras too, which are pretty evenly matched. They both have a wide 120-degree field of view and very little distortion. I was impressed that Samsung has also made the transitions when switching between the lenses much smoother. That said, this is something the iPhone has done well right from the very start, and the iPhone switching occurs at like twice the speed. Finally though, Samsung has a zoom camera. The only specs given to me are that it can do hybrid optical zoom at 3 times and super resolution zoom up to 30 times. Really though, Samsung is talking in riddles here. These are marketing terms, and all we can really tell from this is that the actual magnification, the optical magnification of the S20, is less than 3 times. My best guess is that the zoom on this phone is a combination of actual, real optical magnification, but also cropping into the sensor, because the telephoto camera is a 64 megapixel camera, so there is room to do this. They call it space zoom, which is a bit of a push for what it really is, but it's still ahead of the iPhone, and it's fairly safe to say that for the cameras in general, in most scenarios, Samsung will offer both more versatility and a better quality final output. Samsung now has a Pro video mode, and a few genuinely thoughtful bits of software, like better super steady video with more advanced AI and improved hardware, and a single take feature that lets you just press one button and capture both photos and videos using both wide and ultra-wide cameras. It's a really clever feature. It's something I never really thought about doing, but the second I heard them talk about it, it makes total sense, because there's so many times I find myself in where what I really want to do is enjoy the moment, but I've got to capture it too. And so this lets you do that. You can capture everything without needing to think and worry about which lens you're capturing with or whether you want a photo or a video. It just gets everything. Speaking of software, it is Android versus iOS, and there's a good chance you've already made your mind up over which one of those you prefer, but I will say this. Samsung's skin on top of Android has never been slicker. I'm not personally a fan of the new S20 wallpapers, but it has never been more satisfying to fly between home screens and open applications as it is on this phone right here. And part of that is just because of how nice the haptics are on the phone. Samsung has taken the high-quality vibration motors seen on the Note 10 Plus last year and further tuned them to deliver a new level of tactility. And something else I noticed this time round is that it feels like Samsung is trying to counter Apple's key software differentiators. They've built QuickShare, their answer to Apple's incredibly good AirDrop, and they've worked with Google to seamlessly integrate 1080p video calling into the phone's UI as an equivalent to Apple's FaceTime. I still prefer Google's Pixel skin in terms of raw visuals, but Samsung's One UI isn't far behind. The iPhone 11 software looks identical to every other iPhone's, so there's not much to say about it, apart from the fact that you can expect the iPhone 11 to get major updates for 4 to 5 more years, but the Samsung, I give it no more than 2. The S20's battery life is promising, but it's also a bit of a wildcard. Its capacity is high, at 4,000 mAh. That's 20% more than that of the iPhone. But battery is one of those things that I'm gonna have to reserve judgment for when I do my in-depth battery test, so do subscribe before that. You've got to remember, the S20's display is brighter, it's larger, it's higher resolution, and it refreshes twice as fast, so it is going to chomp through battery, not to mention the difference between iOS and Android optimization. Oh yeah, and both phones have fantastic audio, with dual speaker setups and reasonably good bass. Now, a couple of final things that I would say are going for Samsung before I bring this to its quite interesting conclusion. Charging. The S20 charges with 25 watts of power, and actually ships with a 25-watt charger. I realize that sounds like an obvious point to make, but it's not the case with the iPhone, which can charge with 18 watts of power, but only ships with a 5-watt power brick. The S20 starts with 128 gigs of expandable storage, which seems pretty generous next to the 64 gig non-expandable iPhone 11. If you were the kind of user who wanted to keep files stored locally, that's a risky option to go for. And connectivity-wise, the S20 is a 4x4 MIMO phone, meaning it's got 4 antennae for better signal, and better data bandwidth versus the 2x2 iPhone. Plus, of course, the S20 has a 5G option, something no iPhone to date offers. That's a big deal in 2020. If you were buying a phone now, you're gonna use it till 2022 or 2023 probably, and there's a good chance that at least by then you'll probably want the option. There's more though. While both phones support wireless charging, the S20 has fast wireless charging 2.0 and can use this same charging coil to reverse charge your friend's phone. And the final main consideration is just that both phones have a different approach to security. Technically speaking, Samsung has the more flexible option with both face scanning and a secure ultrasonic fingerprint scanner, but I'd argue that the Face ID on the iPhone is as good, if not better, than both of those put together. In most cases, having your face scanned is just a simpler, more seamless solution than scanning your finger, and Face ID itself is something like 20 times more secure than Samsung's fingerprint scanner. So, who is the winner? In the end, it all comes down to both companies' unusual pricing structures. For the S20 in the UK and some other regions, the base model is really reasonably priced, but what they've done is for other regions only launched a 5G version. That pushes the price up. So, in the UK, the S20 is not hugely more expensive than the iPhone 11, and that makes it a complete no-brainer in my opinion. A better value phone for 97% of users no matter what ecosystem you're in. But in the US, that's a bigger price gap, one for which there is a case for either phone, depending on what your specific needs are. Don't forget to check out the giveaway, and if you haven't seen it yet, the S20 Ultra versus iPhone 11 Pro Max comparison I released yesterday. This is Mr. Who's the Boss, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.